Welcome back to yet another episode of the Big 12 Huddle. As always, here I'm your host, or co-host, I should say, Calvin Alexander, a host of the CJ Tour podcast, with the co-host here, Roger from the Night of Ones podcast, or Night Bengal. And this week we're joined by the BYU podcast of the College Huddle with Trevor from Sats Warrior, or Saturday's Warrior, BYU. Trevor, how's it going?
Going well, guys. Thanks for having me on.
Trevor, did you catch last week's show where we called Utah fans BYU fans?
I missed that.
Well, you should go back and watch it.
Was that a slip?
No, not at all. That was an insult. They called us golden, so had to give it right back to them.
I mistakenly have called the UCF the Golden Knights. Like, I don't want to say every single podcast, but close to it. I mean, we would definitely be saying more than not. And mistakenly at one point I definitely messed up and said it. Roger corrected me. There was like a 5-minute stretch of the podcast where we were getting the information and the whole backstory. And then every time I've messed up since, we still get the 5-minute heads up of like, hey, this is almost as bad as you calling me a BYU, as like me calling you a BYU fan when you're a Utah fan. So that's what we got word today is. Also, I just completely spaced on last week's podcast, so I apologize to everyone. We never picked the BYU game. I don't think the Utah guys would have picked BYU, but who knows? We'll never know. So
a lot of people didn't have BYU.
The Friday night game was tough. It was a different day, so just completely forgot it existed.
Well, you shouldn't have had because it was a good one. But these Golden Knights of Central Florida, is that who you're talking about?
Yeah, the previous Golden Knights of a few years ago, Utah, man.
No longer golden, but
no longer golden. We were golden for the span of I don't know, it was 4 or 5 years. It was a branding thing, and they totally messed it up, and then it kind of stuck. And now the media does it on purpose, including Calvin. I think there's a conspiracy here.
What? Oh, it's one of the what do they call that? The Mandela effect.
Yeah, pretty much.
Never the Golden Knights. Everyone just made it up on their own.
No, I'm telling you what it is. What it is we peeved off so many people during 2017 during our run that the Twitter mafia and everything that's going on with that the media personalities, because they got all this stuff from the Twitter mafia, they just continuously called us Golden Knights. So it's a thing. It's we're always oppressed. We're playing that card for the Golden Knights aspect of it for sure.
I'm sorry to admit that I was not aware they dropped the Golden, but I'm good with that. I kind of don't like the qualifiers in names generally.
I agree. It was terrible. It was a terrible branding decision. It was a span of 5 years max, and they changed it from Knights to Golden Knights, and then they changed it back, and everybody just seems to remember the Golden for some reason.
Why did they change originally from the Citronauts? This is something I'm interested in.
Okay, so the Citronauts.
Have I opened up a can of worms here, Calvin?
I'm fascinated as well. I had no idea there was a previous
brands
name.
And logos. People say we don't have any history or any traditions, but we have too many traditions, maybe more than anything else. But no, the original Citronaut, which is the little orange guy that looks like the guy from the Jetsons, he was not an official mascot for UCF. So we had a few unofficial mascots early on. There was Vinny the Vulture, because we had vultures all over campus. So back when we first started the football program, and the school had Vinny the Vulture, and then we had the Citronauts for a time there. They were looking at changing us to the Sharks. And we kind of stuck with the Knights, and then we rolled with
Orlando landlocked.
Yeah, it is, but we've got Sharks on 3 sides anyway. If you go far enough south, you run into them. If you go far enough east, it's about 35 miles, you run into them. If you go another 90 miles to the west, we've got Sharks too. So I don't know. We could have been land sharks, Mako. I have no idea what they were thinking. But we landed on the Knights, and so the Citronaut came back in vogue probably around 2017, where they were pulling the space theme, when they really started pushing the space theme before everybody else was doing space uniforms and stuff. It was like our niche thing, And so obviously the Citronaut works well with the space theme. So we brought him back, and he's kind of become a thing.
Yeah. Interesting. Can I have one last detour question while we're on it? So why and I would ask TCU the same thing. Why is Central Florida offensive? Like, we go by BYU, but if people say Brigham Young, like, I don't think much about it, but why is it not Central Florida? Absolutely UCF.
A couple reasons. One, there's a stigma that's around directional schools, around college football, that's kind of been thrown around. It's, if you're a directional school, it's like typically a regional school, not a full major university. And that's true of UCF and how we got that name. We were actually Florida Technological University, FTU was our original name. And then when we became, it was for engineers. It was founded for engineers as a space grant university.
Sure.
To support the space program. So when it was founded, that's how it was founded. And then it became a larger university as they started adding colleges, and was a regional college. And the branding had been around long enough that they just kind of stuck with it. But that's the reason why. And, we have other schools that have directions in them, like the directionally challenged school of West Central Florida to our west, that was in the Big East at one point. But you've got like Southern Cal that uses USC and Southern Cal, and then you have South Carolina that uses it. But it's kind of been used as a, hey, stay in your lane, be in your place, quit being an upstart. You guys are a directional school, kind of negative connotation for a long time. And the branding is UCF. And that's the real reason why.
Don't want to be a directional school. Okay. Or associated.
Which BYU is not. It's just Brigham Young University, right? No, neither is OSU. So that's why. And because it has more of a regional connotation for a regional university as opposed to a national and now international university that UCF is today.
Nice. Well, I would have known all this had BYU and UCF played last year, and I could have asked you all those questions then. But alas, we've got on a long detour, and I'm the guest. I'm sorry, I'm derailing your show here.
That's all right. It's information for other Big 12 fans. So they may have been wondering where the Citronaut came from, why it's UCF, why we don't like Golden, and now they know. So thank you for that.
Great. Well, now you know, and knowing is half the battle, just like
G.I. Joe. Yes. There you go. All right, Calvin.
Well, with that being said, there were two things I took away. I'm glad we're not the Orange Cowboys. The Orange Cowboys would be weird. The Orange Oklahoma State, it'd be weird. Also, I'm glad we're not called like the barely north of center / east Oklahoma State University. Like that would be a weird, barely north / center east.
Were you guys ever an A&M?
Yeah, we were definitely the Oklahoma A&M.
That's what I thought.
We are the Princeton of the Midwest. That's where our colors come from. That's our orange and black. Okay, so anyone was curious there. But as I had to tell someone at work today, I'll just let everyone know as well, too. Our building for our basketball team was originally the building for the 4-H meeting and gathering of the entire state of Oklahoma. So the more you know with the whole SpongeBob thing and everything. But with that being said, how about this Brigham Young University Cougars beating up on the
please.
BYU. Oh, so
BYU
beating up on the Southern Methodist University Mustangs.
Thank you for putting them in their place. By the way, those guys, they bought their way in. Nobody likes them. Everybody was saying that they were going to be good this year. They're SM Poo, not SMU this year. And thank you for beating them.
So BYU's. This is only the 5th time BYU's ever played them, but during, the whole realignment thing, how they had like the next 4 in, SMU was always kind of included amongst them. I understood, their old rivals didn't want them. They felt like, and I also felt like we're pretty saturated in Texas. But aside from that, I didn't have any issue with SMU. I didn't know much about them. I was like, I guess it's cool. They have a history with them and be another, private religious institution to add with Baylor, TCU, BYU. And I was like, okay, I guess I don't hate it. I like their uniforms. I was like, sure. And then I got on Twitter and saw SMU fans, and I started to understand. My eyes were opened to why the old Big 12 and the Southwest Conference rivals did not want SMU to join. But it was good to definitely especially as a 2-point or 2-score underdog going into the game, for BYU to come out and take care of business. Now, it was kind of an ugly game in a lot of ways, but and one thing,
the first half was ugly. I was watching a little bit of that game, going back and forth, and it wasn't a pretty game.
Yeah, and so we lost our top 2 running backs to injury in the game, and really there's a big drop off from our first running back, and he's really good, LJ Martin. He's the size and speed, but also the vision, which it seems like some of our other running backs are missing. And our OC is so committed to establishing the run to open up the pass when we have tons of depth at receiver, and we're looking thin at running back. And so that really slowed us down. Then they started doing some design QB run plays later in the third quarter, and kind of got things opening up a little bit more. And I think it helped our quarterback settle in a little bit more and get back into the flow of the game as well. And so then BYU was able to start moving the ball after that. But so it was ugly offensively, but BYU's defense came out huge. It's only year 2 under our defensive coordinator, Jay Hill. And, we saw signs of improvement last year, but the leap from last year to this year, I think, surpassed I think all BYU's fans even hopeful aspirations for this year with this defense. So they were just lights out in that game, and it helps us feel a little bit more comfortable going into the rest of the season, that even if our offense sputters a little bit, that our defense, much like Utah ran into against Baylor, where they felt like they couldn't do anything, and now they were being really conservative once Rising went out, but just really going on the back of their defense. I don't know. It feels pretty good to beat SMU. To summarize your sentiment there, Roger.
Yeah, I'm glad you guys did, because I don't know, they bought their way in. They didn't earn their way in. They don't have the fan base. Even that game, I think it was like you played at SMU and like half the stadium was empty, and so knowing how well BYU typically travels, and I've seen it in Orlando, I'm going to guess probably a quarter of the fans were BYU fans anyway. So, they may have had an eighth of, or 4/8 or 5/8 of the stadium that were SMU fans that were there. It's like they're not a P4 program. The only thing they can do is spend like a P4 program. So that's how I really feel about SMU. Sorry about that.
But and this is, I don't know, we can make of it what we will, but they may go on to still have a pretty successful season, because they're lined up to play the dregs of the ACC. Their average preseason, the preseason rankings of ACC opponents averages over 10, and so they're playing like 10 and below everybody. And then the only top teams that they play were FSU, which we all know how that's going, and then Louisville, who's now ranked, and
Louisville's a good team. They're gonna road grade them, in my opinion.
But then they go on to play, everybody at the bottom, the UVA, the Wake, the I don't know who else, Cal, Stanford. I can't remember their whole schedule, but so they have a chance to go in and make some noise in the ACC in their first year, which is frustrating because everybody says these new guys to the Big 12 can't hack it, which, it is a step up. It is a transition, but had, UCF joined a few years earlier, and UCF did the best of the 4 of us, but had it been a year or 2 earlier for Cincy or for BYU, not saying we would have run the Big 12, just saying it would have looked different than it did the first year. So we kind of caught those at a bad time. So SMU, on the other hand, is kind of lucking into that. So even if they go on to have a good season, I don't know if it tells us that much about them.
Well, thank goodness we don't play them. But you did mention Stanford, which Stanford played TCU, and we will be playing TCU this week. So we'll see which TCU shows up. Cal, can you tell us a little bit about that OSU barn burner there against the Arkansas Razorbacks?
Yeah, if anyone saw me on Saturday, I immediately apologized for yelling at some points randomly, just from either excitement or frustration, or most of the times both. That Oklahoma State game, double overtime, is a great way to come back. Definitely a thrilling finish. The extra couple of gray hairs that have started showing on my 31-year-old head are really thankful for that. But with that being said, Oklahoma State fans have been down this path before. We've heard the term cardiac cowboys beforehand, and Saturday was no different. The one thing I'll say is that Gundy knows how to win in these games now, which is I think something that he's gotten better at, but it's only been the past couple of years. He is not there's been games where he has just not been able to close it out at the end, and it seems like now when it's a close score game, Gundy's won 8 out of 11 of the most recent ones here, and generally has better favors than sorry, Trevor. Just generally has some stuff leaning towards him versus not, which is a very, very nice thing comparatively to like 2017 against CMU and others. But it's weird. We should be able to stop them. I just don't know why we couldn't figure that out earlier. Like our defense just looked like Swiss cheese for a little bit, and then somehow the quarterback from Boise State fell apart.
They made adjustments. I mean, what I saw was Arkansas going back to the same offense that they were, running in the first half and never adjusted off of it. And there was a couple of big deep throws that they connected on, but outside of that, their offense really didn't move the ball. OSU definitely made some adjustments that made sense in the second half. Now, they didn't do that against UCF last year and could not close out that game, but it happens sometimes.
Well, that one wasn't close. That was just not close whatsoever. So we don't need to go there. Some different things that are going on with that one. We'll say that game was different. I mean, I'm a very happy Oklahoma State fan because we won, but don't get me wrong. If we had lost that game at all, I would have been annoyed. But I'm very thankful that the second half proved to be just way better. Yeah, I mean, just way better overall than what I thought it was going to be, honestly. So
a lot of close calls this weekend. UCF's game was not one of them. Like I told you, the key to the game for us last week was showing up. But what I was really happy about was not only did the four-headed monster assert itself again this week, but KJ Jefferson went from a 54 PFF to a 91 PFF score game over game. He was able to throw the ball. He was going to the right places. He wasn't throwing over people's heads. And he was doing the pre-snap reads and putting the ball where it needed to be and tucking and running when he needed to. So this is the KJ Jefferson we were looking for. This is the 2022 KJ Jefferson, not that first week KJ Jefferson. And I have it on good authority. Trevor, I'll swing it to you next.
No. I was just 2022 KJ Jefferson. Yeah, we met him.
Yeah, he was pretty good in 2022, and I watched a lot of his games there. I didn't know he would be a UCF quarterback one day, but he was pretty impressive. Dark horse candidate for the Heisman also last year, and then he showed up and had a terrible game. So we were all kind of worried, and we were like, okay, which KJ is going to show up this week? And this week it was smothered and covered Waffle House KJ, who did go after the game, did not go to the nutrition center, but did go to the local Waffle House and picked up a meal. And I know that because one of the guys on my other podcast, on the Nighted Ones, saw him walk in and do that. So there you go. Smothered and covered it is.
Gotta love it. Gotta love it overall.
And he loves his Skittles too.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I mean, he is 258-ish pounds. So the man loves the Skittles. The crazy thing about it is they kept doing these tight shots on his face. And like the first three plays were quarterback running plays, right? Where he tucked the ball and ran. He was soaked after that. It was hilarious because he was like, there was sweat everywhere. And everybody was like, is he going to be okay for the rest of the game? But he played great.
Should have gone to a cold weather school.
No, definitely not. Definitely not. All right.
I mean, I've seen some KJ Jefferson highlights before, and I've gone, glad we don't have him. Glad we don't. And then I've also seen some where I've gone, man, Alan Bowman cannot do anything besides stand there in the pocket. I mean, that is his one role in this team. It's
Well,
just to not move.
he did well this past week. I mean, we
He
were
did,
watching him. He did.
but Gundy's not a fan, or I wouldn't say he's a prototypical guy who loves mobile quarterbacks. I mean, it does kind of contrast though, because I'd say our most successful times as a team has either been Brandon Whedon, who better or worse first round draft pick as a quarterback, and then the other guys have been mobile quarterbacks. So it's kind of, I mean, Mason Rudolph, it's a bunch of success there, and he's definitely not a mobile guy, but he can step up in the pocket. But with that being said, need to go ahead here and get to some predictions for each of our teams, as well as any other top 25 Big 12 team in play this weekend. Arizona State goes and plays this weekend. ESPN does not have them ranked necessarily on their site, but I think we're probably all taking Arizona State over at Texas State, if I had to guess. I don't think that's too much of a question.
Texas State played really well. They beat the brakes off of who they played last week, but I'm still taking Arizona State. Their defense has been impressive, and their running back Scattaboo is really impressive. So, the key to ASU's season this year is going to be Scattaboo. If people can stop him, and he's tough to bring down, they're going to be a real hard out. But I'm high on Arizona State this year, and much higher on them than I am Arizona.
Gotcha. Yeah, I mean, Texas State's not a team you can overlook necessarily, but yeah, Arizona State's only favored by 1.5 though, which is interesting to me.
So ASU, I mean, BYU's goal is to get bowl eligible this year, and we're already ahead of schedule by beating SMU. But ASU is one of those games on our calendar where we're like, okay, well, we got to win this one. And that is making it look quite a bit more difficult now at this point. So we've definitely, I'll definitely be watching ASU closely this season.
Yeah, for sure. Well, the next game up here, that one's Thursday. So when you're listening to this, it's tonight at 6:30 Central. But then we have two games Friday night. Only one of them has a top 25 team anymore after KU lost to Illinois. But then we do have the Wildcats playing each other.
But that KU game, I mean,
KU game is good, but we can talk about that one at nauseum as well too if you want to. I just UNLV.
Well, Lance Leopold's wife is not happy with their stadium participation for the fans. I don't know if you saw that come out this week, but she put something out, responded on a social media platform that she didn't mean to. I think she was trying to send this to her coach or her husband, who's the coach, Lance Leopold. And basically called out the Kansas fan base and said, they were talking about Nebraska, saying, wishing we had fans like this. Isn't this nice? So, yeah, that got pulled down pretty quickly. He got called out, and it was not good, because Lance Leopold is the buttoned up kind of guy. He's a professional guy. He's been in coaching a really long time. Not something you would expect, but sometimes it's good to step away from the old Twitter machine or the X machine, whatever you want to call it, because that was a big boo-boo. I picked Kansas last week, Calvin, you know that. And I was expecting way more out of Kansas than what we saw last week. Their quarterback's not out, right? Jaden Daniels?
No. I mean, in last week's game, he put up, and I was just trying to find it here on the fly real quick. He was Luke Altmaier, the Illinois quarterback, was the passing leader with 192 yards. But from that game, I mean, KU put up 17 points total, and Jalen Daniels put up 141 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 3 interceptions. So
there's your answer.
I mean, healthy dude. Got a lot of.
He didn't play last. He didn't play most of last year, right? Because Beaton came in for him, so hopefully he picks it up and starts reading defenses a little better, because that's absolutely a way to kill. If you get 3 turnovers, especially off of passes, you're going to lose a lot of games, especially with him being a running quarterback. That makes you very one-dimensional. And they have a pretty good rushing attack, but if you're no threat to pass the ball, everybody's going to be in the box, and you're going to lose a lot of games. So, hopefully for KU fans, he picks it up.
Well, and KU also, just to be clear, had 4 total turnovers on the day too. So they're just, I mean, they're having a tough time no matter what. It seemed like running the ball. Devin Neal, running back, had 14 carries for 101 yards. I would go back to that well if it was me, but the past is the past. Can't change it. So, I mean, I want to say KU, but if we're all going through transitive properties, what do we want to say? UNLV beat, oh gosh, I was trying to, UNLV
Houston,
beat Houston, and then Houston played OU and only lost by 4. So maybe OU's not all that good. I don't know. There's a lot of just like stuff we could try to filter through there. There's probably nothing.
I don't
really
think Houston fans understand what happened at OU. I mean, they came from that team the previous week, and then you watched them last week, and it's like, okay, how's this happening? How's Oklahoma only scoring this many points during this game? You know, like what's happened there? I mean, if they're struggling that bad against a bad Houston team, I can imagine what it's going to be like in the SEC for them when they get in conference. That being said, you know, I still think Houston's a paper tiger. I'm going to go Kansas all the way. They clean it up against Houston.
I mean, they're a 7.5 point favorite this weekend against UNLV. So yeah, I mean, KU. I'm assuming it's also got to be pretty annoying to have to go play in a different stadium than your own if you're a KU fan, because they're just redoing their stadium too. So that can't be fun with the fan participation as you talked about earlier. But then the Cats, the Big 12 Cats, have a matchup here. Not the Cougars and the Cats. So we'll at some point BYU will play, and we'll have all the Cats playing each other. Have the round robin of Cats at one point. But for now, at least, it's just the Arizona and Kansas State playing against each other. But yeah, in Manhattan, Kansas. So see how Arizona deals with that real bad cold here in September. I'm just kidding. It's gonna be like 80 degrees this Saturday here. But after Kansas State's play so far this season, I'd go, man, I don't know. They barely beat Tulane, but then Arizona followed it up that night with really just a bad showing against Northern Arizona. So what do you guys feel about this game here so far? The line, just for a heads up here, this all through like ESPN Bex, that's the side I'm on to pull it, is K-State -7. So just for reference.
You know, I wonder, and you guys, I'm curious to get your opinion. Is this, or these guys, maybe in both cases, somewhat limited by maybe they didn't want to show their whole playbook, so they're kind of, you know, limiting themselves, and then ended up finding themselves up against stiffer competition than they were expecting?
I don't think so. I think having watched that Tulane K-State game, what K-State's going through right now is something that I wasn't expecting, which is Avery Johnson being not as effective as I thought he'd be this year. He got into our game last year when they beat the brakes off of us by running against us. And K-State's known for their offensive linemen, and they have a pretty good system on doing that, like the Nebraska of old was. So I was expecting a lot more out of them, but Avery Johnson's working out some, and he's a great quarterback. He's 4-star. Like, he played really well against us. You know, so I think they're just working out the kinks with Avery Johnson. Their defense bowed up, and Tulane may be better than we think. Their quarterback looked really, really good, to be honest. He's a true freshman. This was his second game. He played really well. And the running back was also very good. So I'm going to say that it was just K-State. I think in K-State's case, it's Avery Johnson trying to work the kinks out, and it stopped their offense quite a bit. And then Arizona, I told Calvin last week, Arizona is the wide receiver QB combo, wide receiver 1 and QB combo, and that's it. That's all they've got. You know, so if you stop that, which they tend to use him in long ball situations. They actually, I don't know if you guys know this, but both of them played together when they were younger, which is why they committed to Arizona. So they've been hooking up for passes for probably the better part of 10 or 15 years throughout their careers, right? And so if you stop that combination, Arizona really doesn't have anything else offensively to hang their hats on. Whereas someone like Arizona State can just hand it off to Scattaboo, right? So what's interesting to me is if K-State's defense is going to show up, if Tulane is as good as they looked last week, then K-State's defense is probably going to shut down Arizona, and I expect Arizona to go down. I'm going to go with K-State. I don't think K-State right now offensively is as good as we were expecting them to be. So they're not as good a team, but I think their defense is good enough to stop Arizona. So I'm going to go with K-State in that game.
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, there were some question marks with Arizona this year with the change of the coaching staff and losing some players and things. But yeah, I'm with you. I'm going to pick K-State in this one, especially with it being played in Manhattan.
Yeah, it just seems too much of a stretch to see. Really, I mean, like Roger, like you said, it's the Noah Fafita and wide receiver show. I mean, like that's at the end of the day, and they just don't have much beyond that. It's really hard for me to see that in the competition both teams played last week, respectively. Tulane just, I would guess, is on another whole level than Northern Arizona. I don't think anyone's got any disagreements about that. And so, with that being said, one team played close, has a redshirt sophomore quarterback in Avery Johnson. The other team has a Heisman Trophy-ish, dark horse-ish, Noah Fafita there, with Arizona quarterback who's underperforming and not performing up to expectations, whereas Avery Johnson, he threw 66 passes last year. So far this year, he's thrown 44. His average is about the same. His passer rating's about the same, all that type of stuff. So if I had to guess here, this is just kind of kinks he's trying to work out, like you said, and he'll figure it out here. And then K-State's defense does look better of the two. I mean, I'd much rather give up a couple points here and there to Tulane. I'm really curious about this Tulane OU game this weekend, though, on a whole other conference topic. But to keep it back in the Big 12, I would not bet K-State and the points. I don't think K-State will, I don't feel great about K-State covering, even though it's just a touchdown at home. Like, you'll automatically get 3. They're giving them 4 more. But I just I feel like Arizona could pull some stuff out of a hat. Maybe show the playbook stuff they haven't shown so far. But yeah, it's, kind of get at what you were saying, Trevor. But
Arizona Arizona was in a dogfight before too. I mean, they were losing. Everybody was like, "What's going on in the first half?" So, I don't think they held anything back. When you're in a game like that and you potentially lose, and you're late in the third quarter, etc. I don't expect that they were holding anything back. And we saw what Arizona was going to be, and what we knew they were going to be, which was an offensive air raid type threat. That it's going to, they've got a great chemistry between the receiver and the quarterback, but that's all they've got. So I'm going K-State again, and Calvin, I think you are, and Trevor is as well.
Yeah. Also, just for reference here, I mean, K-State's one who played an away game last weekend at Tulane. Arizona hosted, of course, Northern Arizona. So for whatever that matters as well too, and how they played and performed, it may not factor in that much overall with 2 non-con games, but still, I think K-State had the tougher opponent and had the tougher situation to deal with versus Arizona if we're splitting hairs. So, yeah, I like K-State a little bit better. With that being said, though, that ends it for the Friday and Thursday slate before we get to Saturday. And then, of course, this weekend we've got, I would say some good games, but I would also say Utah. I think we're all probably picking the Utes to beat Utah State. I don't think anyone's picking against them or Trevor. Cam Rising's out. Utah hates BYU. BYU hates Utah. What else am I missing?
Last time Utah played in Logan, it did not go well for them. And in some ways, maybe it's a good thing that Cam Rising is already out, because Utah State has a knack for injuring and taking out their rivals' quarterbacks. Did it to Taysom Hill and ended his season 3 different times. But yeah, I don't realistically think, based on Utah State and their situation, they're on an interim coach, and the way that they've played so far this season, I think, again, I talked about Utah's defense is probably enough to help them win the game right there. Even if the only touchdown is a defensive pick 6 for Utah. But yeah, I don't know. I'm really tempted to pick Utah State in that one, but
so they're going with the Iowa strategy.
Just defense. Yeah.
Yeah, just defense. Yeah. No, I'm with you. I mean, it is somewhat, people don't realize this, but it is a rekindling of a rivalry almost with Utah, because I don't think they played for a while. And they had a rivalry going back, way back when. Utah State has played spoiler quite a bit. But yeah, I'm taking Utah on this one. Their defense, their size on their lines, that they should win, but they're going to have to do it by limiting possessions and ground and pound.
I have a question. Have they officially announced Cam Rising's status for the season? I'm seeing like rumors floating around on Twitter, but I think that's all it is. It's just trash talk.
It was a 4 days ago. It's not serious, is what Utah officials say. But like, who? I mean,
yeah, I don't think they would say yet.
It was a broken finger, is what I read, and that they had his 2 fingers taped together. So there's been quarterbacks that have played that way. Obviously, it'll still mess with the spin on the ball and your ability to grip it. But I'd imagine they're going to trot him out there, especially since this is his like 8th year of eligibility. This is his only shot to get a shot at the NFL. And obviously Utah has pinned a lot of hopes on this season.
Yeah, they certainly have. Man, if we're getting way ahead of ourselves, but if he has a broken finger and it messes with this throw, and then BYU goes in and beats Utah, then they're just gonna put an asterisk next to that. Say, oh, well, if you would have had a healthy Cam Rising, there's always something. But
listen, Cam has risen. Cam has risen, and I think he's gonna rise back up with this game, even with the finger tape. I think he'll be just fine.
Yeah, so he's not expected to play in this game. We'll have
we got sound effects now. I like it. My dad jokes are on another level. All right, go ahead, Trevor. Sorry.
Oh yeah, so he's not going to play. So it'll be backup Isaac Wilson, Zach Wilson's little brother. So, but he has not shown a lot so far. I mean, he's still a true freshman, just getting in, but. Even so, I would expect Utah to win this game, even if it's closer than they're comfortable with.
Well, especially for you, especially once they get to you guys, if you guys still don't have any running backs, that might be troublesome for you too.
Well, you talk about forecasting the schedule, Trevor. I see this happening. I see him showing up in the Oklahoma State game, playing for a couple plays, not looking great, being pulled out. Oklahoma State barely pulling out the win, because even though it's at home, for whatever reason, that's what we like to do. So not covering the spread or whatever would happen there. And then the week before the Big 12 championship, everyone's going, well, shouldn't Utah get another chance to play Oklahoma State on a neutral site, yada, yada, all type of stuff. And somehow, some way, Oklahoma State gets screwed. It normally happens for us Oklahoma State fans. So I'm just trying to get ahead of it now.
Well, you're just assuming that it isn't going to be, because a lot of people were calling UCF Utah at the end of the season. I'm just saying, and we play on Black Friday for all the marbles. So I don't know, man. I don't know. We'll see.
I mean, who knows?
You're making a lot of assumptions there, Mr. OSU man.
Well, yeah. I mean, you know how it is. I just always go with, okay, what's the worst thing that could happen? And I'm like, well, storylines where like Utah loses the 4th game of their season and it just doesn't really matter. And no, Cam Rising didn't play well, so it should really be factored in. And then all of a sudden you're jockeying for that at-large Big 12 bid because UCF beats you in the Big 12 championship, for example, if I'm an Oklahoma State fan, and we've got one more loss than Utah at that point. Who knows, right? Because we played the one extra game. And our loss could also be to K-State, the following week after we play Utah. So who knows, and that could be our whatever. But getting down to it, do we want to talk about the BYU game here next? BYU at Wyoming, because I think we'll save the UCF at TCU because it's got the smallest spread for last of the 3 teams we represent and talk about. But I like BYU going into Wyoming, going into Laramie, and pulling out a win, of course, because you guys are favored by 11 right now.
I'm interested to hear Trevor's take on this because, like, for me, Wyoming, was supposed to be a pretty dangerous team this year. They've done pretty well last year. What are your thoughts on it, Trevor?
Well, I did actually a couple videos today discussing this game and with some Wyoming fans and from the Wyoming perspective, and their people are kind of down on their team right now, rightfully so. They're 0-2. They just lost to an FCS team at home, and they're just not really seeing a lot from their offense. And so there's a bit of frustration there. But both feel, everyone feels like, Wyoming sees BYU come to town now. The rivalry has not been very consistent, obviously, since the Mountain West days and WAC before that, and even before that. This is actually the opponent, aside from Utah, than Utah State, that BYU has played the most throughout history. So it really is a rivalry that goes way back. And while the players may not fully get it, the fan base certainly does. And they're going to be loud and they're going to be wild. And that might be enough to kind of sway things. We know it's difficult to play there. We know what happened with Texas Tech last year. I don't think, well, at least I hope, that BYU's not going in there just looking past Wyoming. I think you got to take them seriously. Having said that, I do think they're down. I do think BYU matches up well with them. And with the way BYU's defense looked last week, and the way that Wyoming's offense has really struggled, I think that our offense will be able to get enough going. I think there's enough depth there at running back, and we have enough talent in receiver and some of the other positions to kind of open things up a little bit. And so I do think BYU will win this. I do think that they'll beat the spread there on the game as well. So I don't think it'll be close, but it's also one of those games that, anything could happen, especially because I don't know, I know back in the day, BYU fans hated Wyoming too. I don't think it's there the same way that Wyoming fans hate BYU. So it's always dangerous.
Well, you guys are the big Power 4 team now. So yeah, I would imagine it's not the same way. You guys kind of moved on, and we still have the cow hate for the directionally challenged school in West Central Florida. But it's definitely not at the same fervor since we left them behind in the AAC where they belong.
Well, and even when we were, not to completely disparage Wyoming, but even, when we were playing them last, when we were in the same conference, we were beating them pretty regularly. So, it just hasn't felt like a rivalry for a long time. Even when I was there, I don't really have any ill will towards Wyoming, which probably just makes them even more mad. But yeah, when you're going into someone else's house and they hate you a lot more than you hate them, and they're the underdog, that's a dangerous scenario.
Yeah, I've got to say, there's a lot of times where we'll talk about rivalries on here, like overall, and Oklahoma State's rivals to speak of has really just been Oklahoma. Now that they left the conference, it's going to be a new one, but I don't know how to I don't know much about Wyoming or BYU or the history, so it's interesting to learn either way. Just big college football fan. I know Josh Allen went to Wyoming. I know BYU has won a national championship in '84, and they were the, what was it? Am I right in saying this? Basically before the BCS was around, you claimed a national championship. It was voted on by the AP, and BYU won it that year. And I know, I know things about BYU and Wyoming, but I didn't know that much about actually the rivalry with itself. So it's interesting when there's just, you guys have Utah as a rival, of course. Utah State, I would assume, is a little bit of a rivalry than Wyoming. So it's just interesting just to, we play Tulsa, but I don't think Tulsa considers us a rival at all. In the same respect. I don't know if the Tulsa Oklahoma State comparison is at all the same comparison between BYU and Wyoming, though, either.
Yeah, again, I think for older generation, they probably still, have those that ill will towards Wyoming. I just don't, and because by the time I really came into my fandom more so, especially growing up in the East back before every college football game was accessible, I couldn't watch BYU all the time. And so it wasn't until I was a little bit older where I really got plugged in. And by then it just wasn't as much of a rivalry. But yeah, there's all kinds of stories of, getting, them throwing water balloons filled with piss and all sorts of things. They tell players, the BYU players, yeah, you'll want to go out to the field with your helmet on already, So I don't know. I don't know if any of that's true or what, but All I know is that it's a rowdy crowd.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I think
Question
that
for you.
means that we're all picking BYU then. I would assume then,
Yeah.
Roger. I assume
Yeah,
we're all
especially
going
after Trevor gave me the background on them. That was an interesting, because I came into this game actually when I did the preseason previews for this. I was expecting more out of Wyoming, but I'm going with BYU on this one. So please don't pull a Houston or a Cincinnati where it goes to the end and then all of a sudden you give the game away. All right, go ahead, Calvin. What's next?
Well, the next and last one we'll talk about here before the UCF TCU matchup, which I said both names abbreviated there just to make everyone happy, is Oklahoma State at Tulsa, which we're favored by 19. I'm picking Oklahoma State. If you guys want to talk about it ad nauseum, I'm down. Of course, go Pokes. But I think this is just a get right game overall after this Arkansas game the past weekend, and I really hope to see the offense flourish and score a lot of points and look good because the defense, we lost our best pass rusher this past weekend right before halftime and Colin Oliver, and I just do not see our defense playing great the rest of the season overall, except for the fact that we have some favorable matchups against teams that don't score a lot here in the near future. I mean, Tulsa, I don't expect them to score a ton of points. Utah, if Cam Rising's injured, and also Utah plays really good defense, they may not need to score a ton of points against us. Same thing with K-State, week after that as well, too, that K-State may be able to play really good defense against us and not need to score a ton of points either. So our defense might look good points total wise for 3 straight weeks, but then have, playing West Virginia, who knows what West Virginia will look like then, but Garrett Green might have it all figured out and be passing it all over the field in October.
So. I think OSU is probably, based on Calvin's conversations over the past, several months, 6-7 months, OSU may be the most traumatized fan base in all of college football. I mean, seriously, Calvin's always looking for what's the worst possible thing that could happen, and it's going to happen, kind of thing. So it's pretty funny.
This was the 10th year of the Sports Illustrated column that was put out of the 5-article series about Oklahoma State's recruit allegations, all this downfall, etc., that got proven to be completely false. So yeah, Roger, you're right. I'm always thinking the sky is falling, and generally I think it is. So yeah, I mean, might be Chicken Little, but at the same point, when we win it, sick. When we play Texas in the Big 12 championship, the day after we had beat Baylor and Kansas didn't have to play anyone because the other team they were going to play had COVID, and we lose the Big 12 championship, I'm going to go, yeah, sounds about right. So that was basketball a couple years ago during COVID. So anyways, whatever you're thinking, I've got a story to back it up with Oklahoma State. But I'm predicting us to beat Tulsa, long story long. And don't know if you guys disagree whatsoever.
Well, I definitely hate Tulsa. We have a long and sordid history with the Golden Hurricanes.
Hurricane, just to be clear, I interviewed the Tulsa guys, the Golden Hurricast. They are singular, hurricane, not plural. Just they corrected me, just like you corrected me about.
But they are golden.
They are golden. They do have the name qualifier of the adjective color in front of it, but they do not endorse any plural usage whatsoever. They had the hurricane singular. So carry on though. Sorry.
Okay. So Tulsa, you'll be playing in front of tens of Tulsa fans. So I'm assuming it's going to be basically like a home game for OSU. Their stadium is tiny. I think it seats 20,000, 25,000, something like that.
I thought it was 40. I've been in it before.
There's no way that stadium seats 40,000. But either way, the reason we've always had problems playing at Tulsa is because it's completely dead there when you go, because there's not a whole lot of UCF fans that are going to travel to Tulsa. That being said, OSU better take care of business at the home of the Golden Hurricane. I want to say something else, but I'm being PC. Go ahead, Trevor. What do you think?
The game is in Tulsa, so you got to think about that little brother mentality, and they may come through. But no, yeah, I don't. Oklahoma State having a big issue this weekend.
All right, and Roger, you were right. They have recently renovated They renovated since I've been there, actually, so it wasn't all recently, but they renovated in like 2008 to reduce the size to be now 30,000. So I went to a couple of games when I was like in middle school and elementary school, but at Tulsa, I think. But either way, yeah, 30,000. It'll be a lot of Oklahoma State fans. Oklahoma State's closest opponent we can play in football and FBS. When really, I think just period.
There will be
Tulsa,
at least 20,000 Oklahoma State fans there and about 3,000 Tulsa fans there.
Yeah, I would also say like Tulsa is a private school in not a great area of the city of Tulsa, which doesn't lead to a ton of people just wanting to hang out at the games, go to every single game for forever, stuff like that. So there's some other stuff with it too with Tulsa, but yeah, I think Oklahoma State's gonna win. It's also a really cheap game if you're an
The
Oklahoma State
fact
fan
that
to
you're
go
even
to.
saying it that way tells you, I'm telling you, it's that, dude,
Oh,
you've got like OSU PTSD, I swear.
It was a slight quiver as I looked to see if this was the cheapest game to go to this weekend, but no, it's at Houston because of course at Houston the tickets are $7. But I was really looking up to see the price of the tickets here comparatively to the rest of the season for Oklahoma State, and this if you want to go to Oklahoma State game this weekend is your chance because every game after this one is more expensive. So have fun.
All right, so I guess I'll say this before we move into TCU. Houston's ticket prices are lower than their hot dog prices. So let's just put that out there as to what the demand is like in Houston. All right. So moving on to TCU and UCF. The TCU game is a sold out game. So this is the first test for UCF on the road against a quote unquote quality opponent. TCU, having watched both of their games, because I was pre-gaming, because of course every decision that I scream at the TV is going to make a difference in the game. TCU's big thing is their quarterback is a freshman quarterback, and as a quarterback, he's been a little bit. He's a good quarterback. He's just been a little bit inconsistent. So depending on which version of the quarterback that they have that comes out is going to determine how this game goes. UCF is going to rely heavily on the run game, trying to control the clock. TCU is going to try to dink and dunk down the field. Interesting side note, KJ Jefferson did work with Kendall Briles when Kendall Briles was his offensive coordinator at Arkansas, so he knows KJ a little bit. And then there's some folks, obviously, at UCF, and KJ knows the defensive coordinator, Dave Aranda, that came over from Baylor. So, or from Boise, excuse me. So it's really, 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 really a good game. I expect UCF to kind of run away with this one. Our strength is our running game. Their defensive line is not great at stopping the run, and their running game is not strong either. They averaged 3.4 yards per carry in their first game against the Cardinal, and 3.3 in their game against the Cardinal, and 3.4 against LIU. So their strength is really not their running game. UCF's going to try to get them with defense. We've got 4 picks already this year. Doesn't matter who you're playing. If you got turnovers with a strong 4-headed monster as far as a running attack is concerned, it's going to be a long day for TCU. So the key for us is just, hey, if we can get up a couple of scores, we can control the clock, we can run effectively. It's going to be a long day for TCU. So I'm taking UCF in this one at TCU. If TCU does come out all cylinders firing initially, it's going to be a battle of turnovers, and it'll be really interesting to see how that one turns out. Calvin, if you're talking, I think you're muted, brother.
Thank you. Yeah, I assume, of course, you're taking the Knights. Just to be clear.
Yes, the University of Central Florida. So, we can say it that way, but if it's just University of Central Florida, that's not okay. I'm just saying.
Oh, okay. So, we need to pay Ohio State some money because they trademarked to the. But with that being said, I watched the whole TCU Stanford game and was on a flight, didn't have anything else to watch. really wish I had downloaded a movie or something though, because I just like that game was not one that was memorable, and it put a lot of doubt in my eyes that TCU will be halfway even decent this year. Like they walked away with a win, and I just could not believe it. They've got a quarterback who's figuring it out. They've got an elite wide receiver, reminds me of Quentin Johnson, but Quentin Johnson plays for the Chargers, and I know way too much about Quentin Johnson at this point to be excited about any TCU wide receiver, because just because Quentin Johnson was completely overdrafted at that spot he was at. But with that being said, yeah, KJ Jefferson's a better quarterback. You guys are getting the points here at TCU. Like, it's a sold-out game. Maybe the atmosphere will be a little bit different than what I know TCU's atmosphere is. But generally speaking, their stadium's not – it's not a 80,000, 90,000 seat stadium, of course. And if the fans make a big difference in the game, I'd be shocked, for UCF really too. Because you guys have gone into other stadiums and played really well as well. So – I don't know why. I mean, KJ Jefferson, the one thing I'll say is that I really thought this past weekend that Taylon Green, the Arkansas quarterback coming into Boone Pickens Stadium, sold out 60,000 plus, previously a Boise State quarterback, would be a little bit like weary for his first game in like a Power 4 stadium. It didn't matter at all to him, at least in the first half. The second half, maybe, but first half, man, it wasn't phased at all. And now you're telling me KJ Jefferson's going to go into TCU after playing in Arkansas for how many games and being a guy who's just a really well-tenured quarterback? He's the guy who I go, okay, well, if KJ Jefferson loses you the game, then, I'll eat rocks, because I just don't see that happening. And I see UCF pulling it out. I don't have confidence in TCU at all to just to go out and win a game when they shouldn't. I don't have confidence as a TCU as an underdog for them to win. After that first game to open the season, granted, but still, it didn't give me a lot of confidence here.
Trevor?
Yes, the classic Conference USA matchup of Central Florida and Texas Christian. No, actually, I don't think you guys ever overlapped.
We were supposed to in the AAC when it was the Big East, right? That never happened because we joined the Big East and ended up in the AAC. So, that along with Boise was supposed to come along with Texas Christian. It was supposed to be UCF and then TCU, and then TCU backed out, got invited to the Big 12, and then it was a waiting game to figure out when we were going to be invited to the Big East. And we did not overlap, but I'm excited to play the game.
So this is one that I went back and forth on quite a bit. And we talked about it on my show this week, and both of us ultimately landed on UCF. So, but I think I could see this being a close one. I mean, I could see a lot of scenarios for this game coming, but I could see it being close. I think the line on it is pretty close too, or the over under on it, right, is.
Yeah, it's pretty close. I had us picked. I think I had us picked as a 38-21 winner in this game. So I think it's going to come down to the fourth quarter, which I think for us definitely bodes better for us because of our running back situation. Yeah. We have the ability to rotate 4 running backs. 3 of them had 1,000-yard seasons, or 2 of them had 1,000-yard seasons. 1 of them had an 800-yard season last season. So I just I don't see this. If UCF gets ahead, we're going to wear them out and ground and pound them, and they're not going to be able to catch up because they're a typical spread offense type of offense that you would expect from Kendall Briles.
Yeah, and with KJ Jefferson, I don't think he is going to be the quarterback to get UCF over the hump necessarily, but he's definitely a solid quarterback and experienced, and he's not going to. I don't see him necessarily losing you the game either. Although based on that first game, UCF's first game this year, maybe I'm wrong about that. But so I do think ultimately I just feel a little more confident in UCF going into this game.
Awesome. All right, go Knights. We win. All right.
Golden Knights or go Knights?
Let's go Knights.
Oh,
go Knights. And the appropriate response, by the way, is charge on.
Okay, charge on. All right. I've been educated. Learned so much about UCF tonight.
You gotta get
I'm
another
still waiting
UCF
for my
guy
first
on.
cougar tail, which you guys stole from Canada. But like those things look super delicious. I can't wait to go have one.
Me neither. So
you've never had a cougar tail?
They were around. They were not talked about. I mean, I was a college student. I wasn't going to go spend money at the concessions when I was at a football
Dude, it
game.
was a giant, like, long donut. How, as a college student, do you not at least once, like, spend your,
It wasn't, it was, I think they were new but it wasn't like talked about and advertised the way it is now and publicized. I know I look back at that and think, shoot, I was really, I really missed out. So next time I am in Provo for a game, I will definitely get one. But until then, I'll just have to, kind of do the Homer Simpson rule thinking about it.
Just don't do the RG3 like croissant shot there. You know what I mean? Just when you eat that, break off a piece and do it that way. If you take any pictures, don't do it the other way around.
See my wife and me on either end of it, and
the cougar tail. Yeah, exactly. I mean, the jokes just write themselves at that point. So just don't do that.
Okay, noted. Thank you.
It made for some great content online, but I don't think the content that you'd want online either. So with that being said,
fortunately, nobody follows me. I don't have quite the same following as RG3, so I think I could get by unscathed. But point taken, nonetheless.
Well, a couple of other college huddle guys see it. You're in for it, I mean, we got some good graphics department guys. That's what I'm getting at here. With that being said, here I do want to run down the Big 12, but Big 16 power rankings here. What I wanted to do here a little bit different though this week is just have everyone go through your bottom, kind of 8 first, then break it up, discuss it for a second, and then go to the top 8 just so that we have a little bit less monologue in here from me. I don't want to wear everyone out too much here, but with that being said here, Roger, would you like to start us off here this week?
All right, sure. We have a new bottom team for me this week, and that is Texas Tech. So Houston went from -32 to a little bit higher than that. So Texas Tech for me, again, they mystified me last week in their game. So I'm going to say Texas Tech is the bottom of the Big 12, although Colorado is coming up on them pretty quickly. Houston checks in for me at number 15. They have not quite climbed out of it, but I don't know what to make of the team after that Oklahoma shenanigans that was going on there. Next up, I have Colorado. As you know, Calvin, I am not a big Colorado fan, and they did not give me any reason to become one last week when they played. After that, I have Cincinnati. Cincinnati seemed to put a few pieces together last week, but they're still struggling and trying to find their way offensively. They looked a little bit better than week 1. But they still ended up losing. Next up, and I know Trevor's going to hate me for this, but BYU, I don't know what to make of BYU right now with the running back situation that you guys have and the tight game that you played last week. So I'm hoping I'm rooting for BYU this week to move it up. Next up, and here's another fan base that's going to hate me, Kansas. I have Kansas there next week. It was just inexcusable for Kansas to lose that game against Illinois, and the way they lost it did not give me very much, confidence in Kansas, because I was talking up their quarterback situation, and I thought this was the year of the comeback for them. Did not show that last week. After Kansas, I have West Virginia. West Virginia had a bounce back week after a tough outing at Penn State, but they bounced back, did what they were supposed to do. I expect West Virginia to be up higher in my rankings next week, but until they win a couple more win a game or so to prove that they're truly back, that's who I have there. And then lastly, how many is that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yeah, I was right. Next up, I have Iowa State. Iowa State beat Iowa. That was a great comeback win. I wasn't expecting that because Iowa actually had an offense this game, which was surprising, unlike the past 2 seasons. But I still Iowa State's a late season team, and if they show up in the latter half of the season, I expect them to move up pretty quickly. Great win by Iowa State, and they obviously moved up my list.
Well, I'm surprised where you have Iowa State, because they're the first team in the Big 12 this season so far. We're 2 games since, it's not a lot to say, to beat a ranked team. So, little surprise.
But it's Iowa. I don't have very much faith in Iowa anyway. They might do. I think they will do well in the Big Ten, but I don't think a lot of the Big Ten right now, outside of especially after the showing this past week, Michigan State showing, a few of the other teams showing, Penn State, the first half that they had last week. I don't see a lot in the Big Ten to be excited about outside of OSU. Obviously, Michigan is down. So who's gonna pick up the gauntlet for the Big Ten this year and be that competitive team? I just don't see a lot there. So I think that Iowa will do well because they have a pretty good defense. But if they let Iowa State back into this game and won, I don't know what to make of them. So for me, Iowa State, I think there's better teams on their schedule, and I think that they're going to be in the Big 12, and we'll see how they do then.
All right. Well, I guess with that being said here, I'll go and say my here, bottom 8. So last week, I don't know what's going on with Texas Tech. First weekend,
nobody does.
You could barely beat ABCU, as we've talked about at length here. Then you play Washington State, and granted, it was in Pullman, but like 16 points from Texas Tech. I thought they could play some offense. I thought their quarterback was supposed to be somewhat good. I just thought that so much more potential for Tech here, and they're barely 1-1. They should be 0-2 to start out the season. And then you've got a Cincinnati team who was up 27-6 at the end of 5 minutes left, in the third quarter, and ends up losing the game. I mean, 22 unanswered points. You could not be doing that, Cincinnati. I mean, it's to Pittsburgh. It's not to Alabama or to a Power 4 team.
UCF can't say anything. Last year's Baylor loss was atrocious. So, I'm going to be quiet on that.
Well, sure. And then I guess Pittsburgh's in the ACC now, so I can't say not a Power 4 team, but Pittsburgh probably will not do anything this year. Pittsburgh's not a good team. And
let me say this. Pittsburgh won that game and fired their AD.
There you go. So tells you all you need to know. Also, this is in Cincinnati. So you lost the game on your home turf as time was winding down, and you lost all the momentum, even though it was at home. I mean, you'd expect it to be the other way around. Oh, it's a road game. The crowd gets into it, etc. It was the other way around. So anyways, with that being said here, next up is Colorado. They can't block anyone. Shedeur Sanders could be a decent quarterback. I don't want to be an NFL draft scout right now because I don't want to be trying to look into his tape and figure out if he's good or bad. I also don't want to be figuring out, is Travis Hunter a head case or not either? Because you know what? I don't think we know. I think they honestly could be so frustrated with what's going on and what they have to play with that it's just why even try? But they have to try because they have to play out the season. But then again, I don't feel bad for those guys at all. I just don't feel good about making any predictable decision at all in Colorado, except for they're bad. They're number 14, the Big 12 power ranking in my book here. Next up is 13, Baylor. Honestly, you made it look like more of a game from the score against Utah. That's only because Cam Rising went out. I mean, that's the only reason why. Otherwise, this would be a huge blowout. I mean, the passing leader is Daquan Finn. It should have been Cam Rising from this game. It just is literally he went out probably to preserve himself a little bit for a game against your Oklahoma State Cowboys here in 2 weeks. And anyways, I mean, Baylor looked bad. They looked really bad. They looked out of their element. Grant's in Utah, but still, I couldn't do it. 12 here is Houston. They're 0-2 to start out the season. There's some teams that are 1-1 on this list that I have worse than them, but that's only because they played an OU team respectably somewhat close last week, and they had the passing leader and Donovan Smith on their team, and it wasn't Norman. So I'll give them a little bit of respect there. They played a 15 team in the country a little bit well, so that means they're only 12, even though they're 0-2. Next up is KU. Who is Illinois going to be good? Roger just monologued about that and said a couple words about it too. Probably not. So you lost to Illinois by 6. And then here I've got Well, I've got Roger's favorite team of the week here as he goes into their stadium this week to play is TCU. I talked about how bad I think they are and why I think UCF's going to win this weekend. So I'll leave it. TCU's just not great. And then at number 9, just to kind of cap off this year, is West Virginia. I just don't know what to make of them so far, honestly, because you played a Penn State team that could be good, could be bad, kind of badly at home. But then again, it was a real weird rainy game that there was a huge delay in the middle of, and a lot of the fans left at home. So I don't know what to make of that. And they beat U of Albany, so you're like 1-1. I just don't know what to do with you too much except for go. I'd rather wait a couple weeks. I'm kind of putting you in the middle at a 1-1 team who's played really one team of substance, and that game was even weird itself. So that's where I stand here with the bottom 8.
All right, Trevor, you're up.
All right. At 16, I've got Texas Tech. No explanation needed. At 15, I have Colorado. I just really don't have a lot of faith in this team. It goes back to when Deion Sanders was first hired. I did not expect a lot. Basically, what we've seen is kind of what I expected. It was funny after those first 3 games last year. I thought, okay, maybe they are putting something together. They don't look fantastic, but they're finding ways to win. And then after that, they just imploded. And I said, no, yeah, this is kind of the regression to the mean. This is what I expected. And it's just more of the same. So I've got them at 15. And I do want to say too, and I think this early on in the season, I'm not really one for, they started here, let's move them down a little bit. So I'm kind of like, let's start from scratch each week, especially this early on. There's very little, small sample size to really pull from and go off of. So I'm kind of throw everything out there and build from there. So at 14, I have Baylor. They found a way to not even make that game close going up against Utah. Once Rising was out, that was their chance to go in there and back up, their play and really at least make that game interesting. And they weren't able to. At 13, I've got Cincy. Just not impressed with them. Like we said, they played Pitt close, but who is Pitt? We'll find out more. And they could prove me wrong, but at this point, they just haven't shown enough. Houston, I moved them up a little bit just because they did play Oklahoma really well. And I think they, again, early on this season, small sample size. Let's give them some benefit of the doubt. And who'd they lose to? UNLV. And we're saying that UNLV could cause some trouble for Kansas this week. So I think that's a good spot for them. At 11, I've got West Virginia. They are down right now. And yeah, they had a nice bounce back win from their disappointing game 1 season opener. But I don't know. They're definitely a team I could see shooting back up, but I think right now, based off of the body of work we've seen, 11 feels about right. They feel like if you just take the temperature of and gauge the fan bases, that feels about right. Versus number 10, where I have BYU, where there are question marks. There's still some uncertainty, but BYU's actually gone and done something. Won against technically a Power 4 team in their house and shut them down and didn't let them get into the end zone once in that game. And so BYU's feeling good about that. And I have them just behind Kansas at number 9. I still think Kansas has the pieces there, has the tool, and they did lose, albeit to probably who will end up being a team near the bottom of the Big Ten, but a Big Ten team. And I think Kansas will be able to keep putting it back together. At 8, I have TCU. I think the middle feels about right just because I don't really know what to make of them at this point. So that's kind of where I have TCU, just trying to figure out who they are as a team.
Yeah, I know we got a couple mixed there, but it seems like all of us in a consensus have pretty much the bottom in the correct.
The bottom is the bottom right now.
The bottom
there's a clear separation, even after week 2. And I do have to make an apology to BYU, Kansas, West Virginia, and Iowa State fans. I meant to put Baylor in front of Cincinnati in my rankings and totally forgot about Baylor. So I'm putting Baylor in front of Cincinnati, Colorado, Houston, and Texas Tech. That being said, they are not very good this year. And apologies to Andy Avalos because I said Aranda earlier, but he was Boise's former head coach and TCU defensive coordinator. And I did that on our show as well and totally messed that up. So apologies again to BYU, Kansas, West Virginia, and Iowa State.
Well, with that being said, Roger, though, do you want to continue on here and
sure.
Just know your top 8?
Yeah. So after number 8, I have Arizona. Again, I'm not a big believer in them. They're going to win some games just by virtue of their quarterback and wide receiver combo, but against good defenses and against good secondaries, they're going to struggle. Next up at number 7, I have TCU. I do think TCU is going to put it together by the end of the season. I just don't know when. They play halves of football that are really, really, really good. And remind me of the TCU of old. And Kendall Briles is a good coordinator. No matter what happened with him in the past at his previous stops, he's a good coordinator and can run that offense. Next up, I have K-State. K-State's got to prove it to me with Avery Johnson in the tough games. The Big 12 plays very, very difficult, close games. There's a lot of good defenses in the Big 12 this year. So for K-State to overcome where they're at and win those close games that they did last year, their quarterback play has to get a little bit more consistent. Next up, I have UCF just above K-State, ranked at number 4. And then in front of UCF, and I think that can change this week, is ASU. ASU does have a good defense. They do have Scadaboo. And so that means they can run defense and play their running back, and he's just an excellent running back. I mean, we have 4 really good running backs and 8,000-yard rushers in the conference, but I would say Scadaboo is on par with RJ Harvey. I think RJ Harvey's a little bit better, but he just has a knack for making things happen even when the offensive line breaks down. Next up, I have OSU. So you're welcome, Calvin. I brought you up a little bit this week just by virtue of beating Arkansas. So please back it up and don't do the Tulsa thing. Oh, there we go. We got some fan noise. We got to get that a little bit louder. And number 1, I still have Utah. Utah's Utah until they start losing. So last year they did not have Cam Rising. They brought most of their players back this year. They have a good defense. They're consistent as far as their ability to run their style of offense and are a well-coached team. So I think Utah really has the opportunity, if Cam Rising comes back, to continue on with their progress, because he's not really the difference maker for them, but he is a good he runs their offense really well. So until further notice, Utah number 1, OSU number 2, ASU number 3, UCF number 4, Kansas State, TCU, Zona.
Well, I got to say, Roger, I'm so excited to see you finally put Oklahoma State in the exact same place that I have them, at least in my rankings, because I don't think we're the hottest thing ever. But I will say also, Oklahoma State was 7th in your power rankings last week. Glad to see they jumped all the way up to 2nd.
Well, your quarterback showed me a lot this week, right? So that was going to be the big thing, was what was he going to do this week in this week's game? And he played a lot better and more consistent and was able to pass well against an SEC defense. So, that was my big question mark, is how well your quarterback was going to play. And he played well enough, I think, to move up the rankings. Although Ollie Gordon, not as hot a season this year.
I got to say, every Oklahoma State fan is curious why he didn't get the ball more in the first half. I think it's because it just wasn't working whatsoever. But then all of a sudden, get Ollie Gordon outside the tackle boxes on a swing pass or whatever, and all of a sudden, score the final 2 plays of the game that Ollie Gordon gets the ball in. So whoop-de-doo, because you got him outside the tackle box and he stretched the field. The part of the Oklahoma State team that I'm really excited about is how our offense develops, because this past weekend, there were passes to a tight end, which we had not seen consistently, at least, during a game in several years. I mean, you have a former NFL tight end, former Oklahoma State
NFL
Cowboys
tight end
are
player?
NFL tight ends. I mean, yeah, I mean, there's two of them. Yeah, and I would match that whole thing up. But still, I mean, Jelani Woods, former Oklahoma State Cowboy, did transfer out of Oklahoma State before he went to the NFL. And then Blake Jarwin was, with Dallas Cowboys before he had career-ending injuries as well too. So good to see Oklahoma State incorporating the tight ends again, / the Cowboy backs is what we call them because it's a fullback tight end hybrid. We're just trying to breed Taysom Hills at the end of the day is what I'd say. But with that being said here, I do have BYU at 8 in my power rankings. I mean, so far, two decent wins, but like the teams that you're ahead of is West Virginia, TCU, KU, and Houston. And I just really KU's got to show me something. I don't want to go back into my bottom 8 to talk about them too much longer, but like you lost Illinois and you didn't look good at all, and your quarterback's healthy. I thought that was the whole reason why you were good is because your quarterback is healthy. But BYU, I mean, I'm at 8. Arizona State, I have at 7. I do not think this Mississippi State team that they beat this past weekend is any bit as good as really an SEC team should have in their name. I mean, I think if we're taking the top SEC teams, I think it's a while before Mississippi State is even mentioned. And Blake Shapen's their quarterback.
Jeff Levy, though, former UCF coach. I'm just saying.
Well, but they have Blake Shapen at their quarterback, who lost 6 games for Baylor last year, and then Baylor said, "See you later," like don't let the door hit you, which kind of shows me that maybe you aren't that good whatsoever. But Arizona State beat a Power 4 team, and they kind of blew them out. Mississippi State came back late to make it kind of a one-score game, just box score deal, but it was Arizona State the whole time. They're Cam Scatterbo ran for almost 300 yards. He put up to over 250. It's like a crazy amount of just really good, just solid rushing. So shout to Arizona State, but did you really play anyone would be my question. I mean, that's kind of why I still have you at 7 and not higher. After that, it's UCF. UCF is here at 6, and I just do not. UCF is a team that so far you guys just have not played anyone to say some stuff about. I mean, you played Sam Houston, hosted them, blew them out like you should have. You've done everything you should have. That's why you're 6, and that's why you're not any lower. But you just also haven't played anyone. Otherwise, I'd put you higher. You played New Hampshire week 1, blew them out like you should have. You just done everything you should have so far. You've outpaced the point spread. You've done everything you should have, checked all the boxes, but haven't played a road game yet. Just haven't had too much to go. Wait, who's UCF? Now I do think this weekend will be at least a good test for me to make kind of a better decision on UCF where they stand. With that being said, I'll still put Arizona at 5. This is kind of coming off of just talent and sheer effect that I think they'll play K-State really close this weekend, and I do think they have really, really talented guys. Overall, I think I'm right in saying this here. Yeah, the Big 12 Offensive Player of the Week. This last week was Cam Scatterbo because he had 297 yards total, but 262 rushing. But Arizona's McMillan led the nation in week 1 in yardage, like the whole nation, and I think he's incredible. So with that being said, I think Arizona could have the best player, NFL draft wise, / skill wise combination, kind of a weird try to mix hybrid. I'm trying to say, in the league, but that's McMillan. That's not Noah Fafita, and it's only 2 guys they got, so that's why they're at 5. K-State I've got at 4. Avery Johnson he passed the ball 66 times last year. He's passed it 44 times this year so far. He's only going to get better with time. The Tulane game is a stumble for KSU, but it's not bad enough a stumble for me to knock him anywhere from where they are. And Tulane could be decent, like we just said earlier. So I'm not really going to knock them at all. But I am going to give huge props to Iowa State. I don't even know where I had them ranked last week, to be honest. I was trying to dig through and figure that out. But I did not see Iowa State beating Iowa. Now, granted, Iowa could be also bad, or could also be bad, excuse me. As we've talked about on the podcast already tonight. But, you had to go in and play at a ranked team who's your rival, and you pulled out the win. They won by 1. It wasn't pretty. But your quarterback had 272 passing yards, and the rest of your team looks halfway decent against what usually is a team that wins purely on defense in Iowa. So give you props there and have them at 3. Oklahoma State at 2. I think that Arkansas game broke our way a couple of times. I do think there's also a couple of things that we could have done to win the game in regulation. Or definitely could have made the first field goal in first overtime just to save me some extra chest beats of my heart there. But with that being said here, the Cardiac Cowboys are full back and full swing, and they're not easing any tension at all. My heart, mind, or body, or spirit and soul. So they're definitely 2. I can't put them at 1, even though 1 is Utah, and Utah is almost in the exact same spot for me as like UCF, just because who have you played so far? You've played Baylor, who I have as 13th in the Big 12. So yeah, Power 4 team who's decent, who's not bad, but just I really don't. Utah could be just a flash in the pan. They could have been like, hey, they were in the Rose Bowl, won it, and now they're playing Big 12 competition week in, week out. Cam Rising just is not a durable quarterback. That's could be his legacy, and we could be talking a whole different story by the end of the season where Utah's like, oh, well, their defense kind of stopped trying so much when their offense just couldn't score any points. They put in a backup quarterback, and the wheels fall off. But then again, Cam Rising could go out and win Big 12 Offensive Player of the Year if he plays the rest of the games, and could just put up a bunch of points and really show up physicality-wise the whole Big 12. So I'm giving Utah the respect I think they deserve. They've done everything they should have so far and above and beyond. So that's why they're 1. But in order here, Utah 1, Oklahoma State, Cowboys 2, ISU 3, K-State 4, University of Arizona 5, UCF 6, ASU 7, and BYU. Bringing me on Cougars, who I do not look forward to playing in Provo, Utah later on this year as an Oklahoma State fan. But enough about me being just absolutely trigger shy at any Oklahoma State prediction anymore. And I'll leave it
Calvin, hide your kneecaps when you play BYU. Just putting that out there. All right, Trevor, go ahead.
Well, it sounds like Taysom Hill had to hide his kneecaps from Utah State. So they may all work itself out. Who knows?
Okay, so I realized last time I got ahead of myself, and I already shared my 8th pick of TCU. I was only supposed to go to 9, so spoiler alert. But 8, I have TCU. 7, I put Arizona, and that shows I'm just, they haven't shown a lot. I mean, they did beat New Mexico by a lot, but looking a little bit shaky early on. And then at 6, I have UCF, and this is really based on they haven't played anybody at this point, so they've looked good doing it. So it's just these other teams ahead of them have done a little bit more, I think, to again, I'm really just trying to base it off of the body of work that we have so far. 5, I have ISU. I think it was a huge win over their rival Iowa, and I know we were all, well, at least I was cheering for them to pull that one off, and that was a great ending. Number 4, I have ASU, really skyrocketing up there, beating a SEC team and looking pretty good doing it, and just really surprised at everything they've accomplished so far this year. So it wasn't expected by anybody. We'll see if that holds up, but right now I think they've earned it. And then at number 3, I have Utah. And again, it goes back to not having really played anybody too difficult. But when they've done it, they've looked really good, at least when Rising has been in. It looks very effortless when he's in. He's not making the most spectacular throws, but he doesn't need to. They're just that efficient with him. But with him questionable, I think they can win a lot of games on defense alone. And I do think Isaac Wilson will continue to settle in, if Cam Rising is out for an extended period of time. But so I'm a little bit shaky there on them. At 2, I have K-State. So again, this is I'm just expecting that they will get things together. They had their back up against the wall this week and were able to pull out a close win. And then at number 1, I have Oklahoma State, not because I have so much confidence in Oklahoma State, but more because, again, I think they just had a very solid win at this point. And so Yeah, there you go. So I've got your back, Calvin. You put BYU higher, so do the same for you. But
Teacher's pet from BYU. That's all I'm gonna say. Teacher's pet.
There is one man on the podcast who knows who has the soundboard and sound effects with them, and that is Trevor.
So yeah, no, it's mostly I'm really just looking at the limited body of work so far. And now Oklahoma State, I mean, that was a close one, but still going in there and pulling those out. Those tight, close wins against a tough team. And Arkansas, I saw somewhere on Twitter this week, but it was it said from Arkansas fans, it said we almost always almost win games. And so that was like last year. They played every single game in the SEC, including Alabama, super close. They looked really good in all those losses, but it just amounted to a lot of losses. So, but nonetheless, still a tough team. And so I expect this to change a lot, especially with a lot of the matchups we have this week. Definitely a lot of opportunity for teams to change opinion. But I think just out of 2 games each so far, I don't know. There's not a whole lot we know. So that's kind of where I'm at with it.
I got to say, of course, love the Oklahoma State prediction there. But with that being said, I just had K-State 4. I just didn't really love. Is there anything you took away from? I mean, I know it's tough. We've been saying it's tough the whole night, but like, is there anything from K-State where you go, you know what? I think you like them, or at least their season predictions a little bit better after the 2 games you've seen, or is it really like a preseason kind of prediction, kind of just rolled into now?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, yeah, probably. That there probably was some preseason bias with that one. I know I said I throw it all away and build it back up, but probably some of that played into it. I still think that they have enough pieces there. Same with Kansas. Like if I was going purely just off of the season, I'd probably have Kansas maybe even lower, but I think that they have enough there. So I don't know. I still think they'll end up being good. I kind of look at it and like, who am I the most scared to play? And honestly, K-State still scares me a bit. And when I think about them, so no, I don't have any, hard and fast reason. I did watch some of the game against Tulane, but it's just kind of a gut thing, I guess.
Yeah, that was the one big difference that I saw comparatively that just, rang more of a bell because, I mean, Rogers OSU at 2. I have OSU, at 2. You have OSU at 1. Not a huge difference there, but yeah, I just thought I'd kind of talk about that all over here. So,
yeah, I think K-State, the key to K-State, like, looking at Avery Johnson, his completion percentage is actually better this year, but he's only doing short passes, right? So it's the 7-yard type of passes. If they can establish the running game and their defense looks better, they can get away with that. Just swing passes out to a running back to break up the box a little bit or whatever. But if they can't do that consistently, then it's going to be a tough sledding for KSU.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Well, that being said here, I mean, good luck to you guys this weekend. Trevor, I hope you and I do not need to really say good luck to each other, in our respective games, although your point spread's a little bit less. Our opponent's a little bit better than Tulsa, I'd say, because I don't think Wyoming has a redshirt freshman quarterback and a basically brand new offensive line to go up against, which that's what Oklahoma State's playing this weekend. So we don't get to Tulsa offensively, we're gonna have to score a lot of points the rest of the season, which we may have to anyways. And Roger, your game I think is the best one on the Big 12 slate. It's on Saturday, I should say, because I think the K-State Arizona game will be really, really good as well too. Of course, 2 top 25 teams. Bizarre's being played on a Friday, of course, but you know what? That's how the schedule shook out. So, yeah. Anything else we want to cover here before we kind of wrap up tonight's episode?
No, I just want to say this. All of our rankings taken with a grain of salt. It's week 2. I'm not a big proponent of preseason rankings because nobody knows how good these teams are actually going to be. I mean, if you've got an Alabama of the world when they were on their run, okay, fine. Georgia, we know they're going to be good. But everybody else, I mean, Alabama struggled against the Cows. I mean, the Big 12 specifically, we had a lot of really, really close, tight games that shouldn't have been close. We had a lot of the first 2 weeks. We had a lot of performances that just weren't what we expected them to be. So again, it's week 2. It's going to take a while for people to get into midseason form. I expect West Virginia to be better, and some of these teams to move up those rankings. But just take them with a grain of salt. It's early, but I have a lot to look forward to in Big 12 land and watching some really good football.
That is for sure. Well, Trevor, thanks so much for joining here on the weekly episode, I guess, of the Big 12 Huddle. If you're not already, you're a Big 12 fan, you got to follow Trevor on Twitter for sure to get his hot takes, news, and notes about everything going on Cougar-wise, including the Cougar Tail, of course, at Sats
yes,
Warrior
please
BYU.
Put pressure on him to buy a Cougar Tail that he was, that he deprived himself of when he was there in Provo. So make sure I'm going to go to 2 Utah games, and one I'm going to have a ski shot at Utah, and I'm going to have a Cougar Tail at BYU. Obviously, I can't have a ski shot at BYU. Hot chocolate's about the only thing that I can get there. But that being said, I'm excited to do both.
I held off on making any jokes with the sound effect board after that being said. So, that was my show of restraint.
I know that's
today.
your catchphrase. You've said it about 72 times during this.
Well, that's my show of restraint here in the Journalator today. So that being said, here, please follow at the College Huddle if you're not already to, and then send us some questions here for the next podcast, and you can do so at College Huddle on Twitter and Instagram. Roger, as always, thanks for joining. Make sure you're following him, and you are checking out the Knighted Ones podcast. Not any color in front of it, just the Knighted Ones podcast. And if you're not already, follow at the CGA Tour as well to get all your Oklahoma State news, notes, updates as we prepare to enter the Big 12 season here and get some more Big 12 matchups this weekend and even more, plenty more after that. So thank you so much, guys. And
go Knights.
Oh, I just wanted to tell you at one point here on today's episode, Roger, I really just got to say, go Pokes.
Go.